Hello beautiful people, today I'm going to show you how I made my pond that I integrated into my garden design. This pond is not made to be filled with a hose. It's designed to collect rainwater in order to fill it naturally. And at the end of the video, I'll show you a massive blunder that I made. So here we go.
This is the area where I wanted to build the main section of the garden and for the pond. The garden would be in this section, and the pond I wanted to make would be around here. Since the sun is really strong during the day, I wanted the pond to benefit of a bit of shade from this tree and avoid excessive evaporation, also to reduce the formation of single-celled algae. When the pond would naturally fill up, excess water would flow at the back of the garden, down the spillway to then naturally trickle to the ditch that the property already had. The tools I used for this job were a Dewalt laser, the laser detector, reference sticks, any sticks will work, a pickaxe, a shovel, and a wheelbarrow. I was curious to see if the rains here would be enough to fill up the pond, but since I live in a subtropical forest with massive rains, I thought it was worth giving it a shot. This is the view of the forest from the hill just beside my place. And from here I can even see after the first set of mountains, the second set, third set of mountains, fourth set, God cloud level, the mighty Pico de Orizaba, which is the highest mountain in Mexico, also the highest volcano in North America, measuring a stunning 4,922 meters. So I started by measuring with the laser to see what area was exactly level, and also to see how I could integrate it in the most natural way. I knew I would need to cheat topography a little to get a bigger pond. From my measurements, I knew that these sticks were exactly level with each other, meaning every stick of the blue line is exactly at the same height. The line in red is the part I will be cheating topography, since this part is maybe 2 inches higher than the part in blue. I then dug out the part that was perfectly level to have an idea of the area it covered. I'm also putting aside the grass to put in the compost pile later, and also keeping the good topsoil to be able to use it in the gardens. When I reached a depth at which the soil has a very high clay content and is not topsoil anymore, I stopped putting it in the garden, and I instead put it in a wheelbarrow to set it aside for later use. I'm not going to try and seal this pond with clay, because at that size it is nearly impossible to make it impermeable. I have tried in the past, and when your water level drops a bit too much, the sides of the pond starts to crack and let the water penetrate the soil. For making ponds without any pond liner or EPDM membrane, you need a properly built dam on a large site, very good quality clay or a ton of imported bentonite, and a swale or a ditch system to divert water to the pond and make it soak in the landscape for very passive redistribution of water. For a small backyard pond, always use a pond liner or the equivalent. Also, on a side note, make sure that you have shoes or boots that you don't care destroying, because it gets quite gucky when you're digging into the clay layer. I'm sure though it could give good ideas to modern clothing designers. You just stepped in poo model! Will impress all your friends while being ecologically friendly. Next step was to hook up the pond system to the water supply, which in our case is rainwater. In the back of the property, I found some old tiles that were used to build the roofs of all the building on the property. This will be perfect to create ditches to collect the water from the driveway. I start by carving a rough channel with my pickaxe to be able to stack the tiles one on top of each other and trying to create a gentle and linear slope towards the pond. Here, I didn't measure anything. It's the type of thing that just requires trial and error. I then stacked them progressively by overlapping them by 1 inch approximately. And I also tested every section with water. I measured the level of the spillway ditch to install the first tile, which is actually the water line I want to have in the pond. And I do the same thing with the tiles by overlapping them by 1 inch. I built a little rock bridge over it just for habitat for small geckos here that do a great job versus some pests. I added rocks on each side of the tiles to help protect them, and to help contain water in case of an extreme rain event, or at least to minimize casualties. The rocks are also put there to hold the soil of the garden beds and help define each garden bed. The only part of the ditches that was left to do was connect the spillway to the property ditch by continuing the trench along the wall until it just cascades out and flows to the main water ditch of the property. That evening, I had the opportunity to get some rain and saw that the system was working quite well. But even with a heavy clay content, My soil wasn't able to retain any water except a tiny puddle. This is exactly why I'm advocating for pond liners when it's just a small backyard pond. Then with my bamboo sticks, I marked the water level all around the pond so I could know exactly where to carve a plateau to lay down some rocks. As you can see, all the sticks are at the same level. There was another good spot where I could actually gather water. So I went and dug a trench to harvest even more water in the pond during rains. What I liked about this one is that it's in a very shallow valley. So I just needed to exaggerate the features of that valley to make a perfect candidate for harvesting water. You can see me here putting some heavy clay just underneath the tiles to make a really airtight base to prevent water from seeping in the cracks and make its way to the pond. A quick test with water from the hose to see if everything is working properly. And yes, it's doing exactly what it was meant to do. It was now time to carve the plateau to be able to put rocks. The rocks will play two roles, holding the plastic down and act as a natural finish to cover up the plastic. The rocks are also used by dragonflies to throw water at them for some weird reason. A reason that I really haven't figured out yet. Anyway, this is why I like working with a laser or an equivalent tool. It makes everything easier afterwards. I then do a last verification and cleaning of the pit I dug, just to make sure that there's no big rocks or lumps that could tear up the membrane. And also watching out for big roots that are coming out of the soil and poking out. You want to get rid of those also. Last verifications with the laser all around the pond to make sure everything is level, and I also put a bit of soil near the back wall to have a slight slope leaning towards the pond so I don't get any overflow on the cement wall. And here we go with the plastic membrane. Don't ever try and cheat on the dimension of a membrane. You always want it a bit bigger than what you need in case of last minute changes. Because if you buy it just a tad too short, you will be reciting all the swear words of all the possible languages in the world. I took the time to put the plastic membrane underneath the last tiles of the two entry points of water and also under the first tiles of the spillway. I'm doing this just to make sure that there's no leaks at those spots where there's more water activity. And on the plateaus, I made sure that I left about 2 inches of plastic going up to the ground level so that if water goes under the rocks, it doesn't percolate into the soil of the gardens. The region is very rainy, so I don't want to saturate my soil with water. The first entry ditch I did was a bit more horizontal than what I ideally wanted, so I just put a small amount of cement to patch the joints between every tile just to make a better seal. The risk I'm taking here is that the rains will start again without my little patches having time to dry up, because the last thing I want is cement in my pond. After that, I just needed to put the little finishing touches by placing the rocks on the back wall and cutting the membrane all around the pond to hide its ugly face. And also add a bit of soil up to the rocks of the beach section, if we can call that a beach, to be able to sow cilantro to solidify the soil with their roots. I'm very happy with how this looks, and I can't wait to see it full of water. But while I'm getting very excited about this pond, I'm not the only one. Being in the mountains of Veracruz, there's not a lot of flat areas, and usually the water flows downhill to reach the creeks and rivers. There are very few lakes in the region, and since the most prevailing pattern of life on Earth is opportunity, this pond represents a massive opportunity for mosquitoes and other insects to breed into this newly created oasis. I know it's hard to see, but during that period, I even had some of these insects gather up in my house through holes in my window screens to do their mating ceremonies. I'm not against orgies, but not these types. So I needed a solution for these insects quickly. I decided to go buy some cute goldfish and small carps to help me manage the insects. Even though I didn't have any way to oxygenate the water yet, I figured that the daily rains would be enough to refill the water, and these hardy fishes could tolerate this until I filled the pond with plants. In only 2 days, these 4 little fishes did an amazing job of clearing most of the larvas and insects to a tolerable level. I was also very pleased to see that I didn't need to feed them since they had enough food from just the insects trying to take a plunge in the pond. But a few days later, I realized that the mosquitoes was a very small problem compared to the one I'm about to face next. I noticed a lot of the guayaba fruit from the tree were falling on the ground, in my garden, and also in my pond. And this fruit tree is massively productive. The fruit is very sweet and rots hyper easily. So the fruits that fell into the water started to ferment and polluted the water, nearly transforming it into alcohol. So on the morning I wanted to empty the pond and start over, it was too late, and my fishes had passed away. And it was all the fault of this guayaba tree. No, in fact, there's one entity that's even more guilty than the tree, and it's me.
I was the one that didn't think ahead. I was the one that took the decision to put the pond there. Even though I had great intentions, it was still a massive mistake. Just because I wanted to test something out. I apologized a million times to the universe, but my actions can't be undone. So the most noble thing to do now is to really learn from this mistake and never make it again.
At least the fruiting season is only approximately 3 months for the guayaba tree. So I thought of building a net with a bamboo structure that could catch all the fallen fruit, that I could either dispose of, give out to people, or sell. Let's help the process a bit. After telling the story to the owner of the property, she agreed for me to cut some branches from the tree. Anyways, it only does a mess and becomes a huge nursery for caterpillars. And caterpillars eat gardens.
Yes, we do.
I cut the low-hanging branches, but also branches that would have been problematic over time for the tree. I then started to empty the pond by hand to be able to clear all the guayabas that fell in the pond. And why not clean a bit the membrane while I was there? But guess what? It rained again, and in less than 1 hour, my pond was filled up again. Damn.
Well, at least I'm good to harvest rainwater.
So I then refined my technique and went with a siphon. I hope I don't get a splash of fermented fruit water on my lips.
Not my favorite thing.
That worked better than I expected, and I spent 100 of the effort of doing it by hand. It's usually way better to work smarter than work harder. As the water is gently leaving the property, this is pretty much where I am with the pond situation. I'm waiting until the very end of the fruit season to get it going again and to have more time to make it resilient before the next season.
I promise to give you an update on the pond and the gardens here once things settle down a bit, and also give more time to Mother Nature in order to do her job. Until the next video, you can binge more content by clicking here. Ciao.